Ruffle, ruffle, ruffle. This is a question from John, who wrote in to say, what political descriptions, narratives or expressions should there be a swear jar for journalists or broadcasters who use them? Examples of this off the top of my head, he says, David Cameron being a centrist, Rishi Sunak being a technocrat, and Suella Braverman's resignation letter. Well, thank you for that, John. This is a really tough one, I think, because there are lots of irritating phrases we all use, but most of the time they are shorthand for some kind of political truth we have to acknowledge and jump beyond. But I will throw in the use of the word ruthless to describe tight fiscal or economic policies. Rachel Reeves is being ruthless in her approach to the economy. You know, that was a ruthless aspect of the autumn statement from Jeremy Hunt, because we don't actually mean ruthless. We mean putting into other people's lives a bit more misery, a bit more hardship, and carrying on as you are yourself for your own political advantage. That isn't ruthless. That's just cruel.
Yeah, they're shorthands for ideologies, essentially, I think. I mean, same with the centrist comment about Cameron. It's not as if he was centrist. It's just that he has this tone, this sense of supposed decency and chumminess that gives him this aura of professionalism, when his policies actually might be quite ruthless, to use your term.
A kind of, you know, sort of cheery, rubbery kind of bonhomie that kind of and smooth and cheerful, a little smile always on his face. But that does not describe the effects of austerity.
I've got Keir Starmer forensic.
Do
you remember that when he first started doing PMQs, every single week, commentators would go, oh, he was so forensic, so loyally, compared to the ruffled Boris Johnson.
But again, you know, there is an element of truth about that. He is a trained lawyer, and his instinct is to pick apart somebody else's argument sort of phrase by phrase and go at it or look at the numbers. And that is loyally in a rather ineffective way in terms of politics. Politics is a cruder, ruder, sort of wilder kind of trade. And the pained expression on Keir's face when Boris Johnson was calling him Sir Crasheroony Snoozefest, the human bollard, or whatever it might be, shows the difference between somebody who's come up through the arts and understands the brutal art of rhetorical speaking and political speaking, and somebody who is a lawyer.
I think for me, my bugbears are quite similar to what you were originally saying. It really irks me when we talk about the autumn statement, the spring budget, and political commentators refer to the government's finances as the nation's credit card or, you know, the household budgets. It's this kind of oversimplification of how government spending works. And obviously it's done to help the public sort of understand, you know, how these measures will work and the sort of things the government have to weigh up. But as you say, that kind of language allowed people to accept austerity, for example, as a sort of political necessity.
Well, actually, we could look at the word austerity, couldn't we? Because I've got a book on my shelf at home called The Age of Austerity, and it's looking at the 1940s and early 1950s. And in many ways, austerity then felt like quite a virtuous thing. It was kind of, you know, middle-class people giving up a little bit of this or a bit of that for the sake of the higher taxation to create the welfare state and the NHS. And it was, you know, let's not waste food. Let's not throw away clothes that can be worn for another few months in the cause of sort of, to me, it's quite a good middle-class Protestant virtuous thing. Yeah. It's the alternative to mass consumption and waste and all of that. And yet now austerity has become the shorthand for particularly brutal conservative economic policies over a period of, 10 or 13 years.
I think that's right. I think using the word austere or austerity to describe that kind of, that rollback of government spending makes it sound like they're doing something sensible and responsible. But it is, you know, it was absolutely a political choice to withdraw funding from certain areas of the state and allow people to kind of slip through the cracks. But, you know, the way it was described was almost like it was this very responsible decision.
And then we've got this, as you say it, Zoe, this analogy that government spending is like credit card is sort of one of Thatcher's,
max out the credit card.
Exactly, Thatcher's enduring legacies. I mean, if you are going to use an analogy, it's a shame almost that we don't have the shorthand of business, you know, who borrowed to invest and try and grow things. Of course, the state in no way is like a business because it has its own currency, as if, you know, Tesco could start printing its own money if it wanted to set up a few more stores. But it's much better than the analogy of the household, which just makes it seem as if borrowing is intrinsically bad and you're obviously not going to get more income just from borrowing. And
to throw one final phrase in, I'd also stick in U-turn as well, because we talk about U-turns all the time. And obviously I know that sometimes a bit of policy is genuinely a U-turn. But I think it's used a bit too much, a bit all-encompassingly for when politicians are actually adapting policy and responding to contextual changes. And, it's good that policy develops and changes over time. If politicians stick to one policy they had in 2019 and don't change it despite all the sort of things that are going on, that would be wrong. So although sometimes U-turn is correct, I think sometimes it's misused.
It's one of Orwell's dying metaphors rather than dead metaphors, I think. So it doesn't work at all.
Yeah, and it's used as a kind of yaboo, you've U-turned, you fool, to kind of, as an allegedly humiliating assertion, rather than if you said to the same politician, so you've changed your approach on this. You could then have a more grown-up conversation because the politician would say, yes, we have changed our approach because this has happened, or because we didn't understand quite how serious that aspect was going to be, so we've changed. And if you get away from the ha-ha, you've U-turned, then you have a better conversation.
Yeah, if only, though, they were U-turning because of the facts rather than political circumstances. Yeah. Thanks to everyone who submitted questions. We do read them all, so please keep them coming. If you'd like to send us a question, just go to newstatesman.com/youaskus. If you're listening on Spotify, just scroll down on the episode page and leave a reply. And YouTube viewers can drop a question in the comments. You've been listening to the New Statesman podcast with me, Freddie Hayward, and my colleagues Zoe Grünewald and Andrew Marr. We'll be back tomorrow.